Now we're right in the top of the windmill and we can feel it actually shaking. It's amazing. It's all dithering and jittering. And there's a massive wheel and I'm stood right underneath it, and it was built in 1780, and then there's a load of cogs going underneath which is going like billio, and the whole thing's shaking. It's fantastic.
Settle down on the Wiggly sofa for your weekly escape to life in rural Herefordshire. I'm Ricky from Wiggly Wigglers and I work in the packing shed, hopefully getting your parcels to you in one piece. Join us every Monday as we cover the environment, farming, biodiversity and the things we can do to make a difference. Your co-hosts today are Heather and Richard.
I'm Heather and I'm sitting on the sofa at Lower Blakemere, and I'm joined by my co-host
Richard.
And Farmer Phil's here too.
Hi.
Now, just a quick ask of you.
Yeah.
What did you think of last week's interview where we turned the table on the journalist?
Brilliant. I really enjoyed it, and I learnt a lot from it too, but it was good, particularly when Abigail, the cow, came and investigated him a little closer than he felt comfortable with.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? He was a good sport, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He took it on the chin.
It's good to get a voice for farmers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, this week we've got Monty and his Wormcast as usual. Phil comes in to talk about cattle. Well, that's unusual, isn't it? Good Lord, what a scoop.
Fancy that.
And he's going to tell us if he's got his single farm payment again. The world's most boring podcast.
We know the answer to that.
Oh, we'll guess, will we? What happens when he gets it? That's what I want to know.
He's going to treat us all to a steak lunch.
Excellent. Team Wiggly have been off to Holland and find out how our worms are bred. And we've got Plants of the Week with Alison talking about marjoram, pre-recorded on a bitter cold day.
Yeah.
So now we're in the middle of spring, we're just going back a bit.
Right.
We've got a bit of feedback, and so off with the show.
Well, the first thing is I need to know, Rich, whose tablecloth you butchered to make that shirt.
It's a bit hard. It's nice.
It is. I thought it's quite a nice shirt. There's a story behind this shirt, you know. I've had
Good
this
Lord,
shirt
isn't
many years.
Do I want to know this?
Yeah, you probably do, I reckon.
Your past is a bit shady at best.
No, this is probably one of the least shady episodes in my life. I was wearing this shirt several years ago. We went to fishing for bluefin tuna off the west coast of Ireland. A mate of mine went for 3 days, right? Not really sure whether we'd get one or anything. Bit of a boyhood dream, really, to catch a giant bluefin tuna. They've been turning up there in recent years, feeding on a species called Sowry pike, very small little fish, but lots of them because they don't have a commercial market. So anyway, off we went, and the most amazing thing was, first day, didn't see a single tuna, nothing at all, sea was barren, massive great groundswell, felt as sick as a dog.
That was nothing to do with the night before, was it?
Nothing to do with the night before, well, no, I haven't said that. It might have been something to do with the night before. Anyway, the next day we went out, and the skipper heard that there were some bluefin showing further up the coast. So he said, right, what we'll do, lads, is we'll steam up the coast and try and find one. So as we were going up the coast, a couple of hours' time, we saw these huge kind of silhouettes, these sort of amazing things leaping out of the water in the distance. And it was like sailing into Jurassic Park. We sailed up the coast and there were these huge bluefin tuna jumping out of the water, chasing their fodder fish. And all these fish between sort of 400 and 600 pound, a bit like your cows. They had the surface area of one of your cows, right? Incredible stuff. But the funny thing was, that day we had a couple of scientists with us from Monterey who had come over specifically to tag bluefin tuna. We'd also had this freelance photographer that wanted to come to get some good photographs for a story. And the BBC came out with us the next day to film us catching one of these bluefins. So we spent the whole day trolling through these bluefins. They didn't want to know at all. You know, the sun was setting and I'd pretty much given up hope, and I sat there and my mate was in the cabin just rattling to the skipper. And all of a sudden I saw this huge swirl behind one of the lures, which were like trolling plastic squid. Huge swirl, and all of a sudden, bang, and the reel squealed, and this fish took. I went zooming off, and I screamed to the skipper. I said, "Fish on!" And they came running out, right? They came running out, and this other guy, one of the scientists, grabbed the other rod to wind in the lures really quickly, winding, and it bang, off it went from the outriggers. 2 fish on with a double header, right?
I'm there, Rich.
Absolutely, yeah, amazing stuff, incredible stuff. After about 2.5 hours of serious battle with these things, because they are massive and they really do fight hard, we landed them both. The skipper had a ramp specially made on the back of his boat, and we were able to put slip a gaff in under the chin, pull them up the ramp, and these guys from Monterey had these satellite tags about 3 grand's worth each tag, right? And they tagged these tuna and we put them back. Now on the open market, those tuna were worth about 12,000 quid a piece. And we put them back because bluefins are an endangered species. You know, I mean, obviously, if I slagged off the Japanese for wiping out our seas for eating too much sushi from an unsustainable source, then, you know, it would be pretty grim of me to... I mean, I could be driving around in a Freelander now.
I can tell how much it hurt you.
But, you know, 6 months later, I got the print-offs from the scientists. I asked them to send me the print-offs. What had happened is they'd swum around, they'd gone down the south coast of England, spent a bit of time there, and they'd swum across into the mid-Atlantic ridge, and then they'd separated. So even though they were caught together, they were peas in a pod, the same colour size, same age group. They'd split up. The one tag had popped off just outside the Bay of Biscay, and the other one had popped off just outside the Gulf of Mexico. And the reason they think that is because there are 2 breeding populations of bluefin tunas that spawn in those 2 places. Isn't that incredible? But those satellite tags will be able to record lots of different water parameters, including the time they'd spent in certain areas.
That's a Richard gem.
But what about the poor old tablecloth?
This tablecloth has been covered in all sorts of fish slime.
It's nice of you to wear it to work.
Yeah, no, cheers. You like this shirt, don't you?
It's very nice. This is a sort of pink and blue check.
Hot tuna.
Sort of furry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
No worries.
Over to Phil. Phil, there's been a change in the cattle movement restrictions, I think.
Yep,
that
very
you're
briefly.
dying to tell us about.
The government have put in place this week, or last week, I should say, the pre-movement testing rules for TB, for tuberculosis, and this means that any animal that is over 15 months old that hasn't been tested for TB within the previous 2 months has to be before you can move it from one farm to another.
Good or bad?
On the whole, good, but I do still believe that it has to go with measures to control TB in the badger population as well. That controlling it in the cattle is fine and essential, but we've got to address the problem of TB in the badgers. And interestingly, I also saw last week a piece of work that the University of Warwick have done. They've developed a test where they can test the soil around a badger set and identify which sets are endemic with TB, so that rather than the prospect of slaughtering badgers indiscriminately, we could potentially target a certain set. And that makes a great deal of sense to me, because it means we're not slaughtering healthy badgers, which I don't want to do, but we are addressing the TB issue in badgers, which until we do, we will not cure it in cattle.
Farmers are getting terrible press at the moment because everywhere it says farmers want to annihilate, slaughter, kill, wipe out badgers. What's your response to that?
I think that on the whole, farmers are not thinking that at all. Some of it is that that's an easy headline to write as misunderstanding. Farmers are bad at PR with the press, and the press don't fully understand. I think that the majority of farmers want to get rid of TB in badgers and cattle, and it means culling badgers with TB. And if we can find a way of targeting those and leave the healthy ones, then that's the optimum for me.
What's your response to a wildlife lover who will say you can't possibly cull badgers? Badgers caught TB off the cattle and they're innocent wildlife.
That is entirely true. As far as we know, the badgers did get TB from the cattle, but whatever the history is, the fact of the matter is that the badgers now have TB. The TB will kill the badger that is infected with it, so that the net result is the same. It's better for the badgers to get rid of TB in the badgers, and the only way of doing it is to take out those badgers that are infected. It will lead to healthy badger population and healthy cattle population.
You going to let me get away with that, Rich?
Yeah, seems like a fairly sensible sort of... As much as I hate to say it.
Well, let's hope the test is accurate, because it's only at the development stage at the moment, but if it works, I think that's the way forward, because vaccines take a long time to develop and are difficult to administer, and I personally don't like wholesale culling, which is the option put forward at the moment, but
Sure.
I personally don't think it'll ever be agreed.
No.
And you've got a letter in from who?
Yeah, very briefly, the Williams family from, and you'll have to excuse the pronunciation, the Lane Farm, Bronyth, Carmarthen in southwest Wales, have sent me a magazine from the University of California, which very briefly, the article they picked out for me to read is about greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide. Bit jargonish, I know, but the important one is carbon dioxide, and any way that we can tie up carbon, so plants growing tie up carbon, they absorb carbon dioxide, is good, And the article is basically saying that minimum tillage rather than intensive tractor work in the fields helps tie up carbon. And so from my point of view, adapting the Californian system, mixed rotation, plenty of plant matter going back into the soil and being retained in the soil helps.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we do practice a certain amount of minimum tillage ourselves. The only downside of this argument was that the farmer that they profile is relying on GM crops to go with his minimum tillage so that he can use more herbicides because of the minimum tillage, so that there is that American slant on it, and that might not be acceptable in this country. Personally, I'm not very keen on GM crops because the customer doesn't want them.
Right.
But it was very interesting, and thank you very much indeed, Lisa Williams, for sending it in. And I shall give it to Richard to read.
Yeah, that'll be good. A bit more
I
weekend
feel
reading.
GM is a bit of a big subject
Well,
that we can
Definitely, lots of pros and cons there. Definitely lots of pros and cons. But I'm interested, Phil, one thing I wanted to ask you when you said that, minimum tillage is one thing. How do you define no tillage?
That's a very good question, because no tillage in my mind means no crop. If you look at intensive vegetable production, that's what I would describe as maximum tillage. So you're sifting the soil to quite a deep depth. There's a lot of cultivation going on, a lot of fuel being used per acre.
Yep.
From there, you go right to the other end by using a thing that we call a direct drill, which just slots the seed into the remnants of the previous crop, and that's it.
Right.
We practice something in between the two. We mostly plough, but not all. And the reason we do that is that the ploughing effect reduces the weed burden and reduces the weed killers we have to use. As you go to less tillage, you have more problems with weeds and volunteers, and how you balance that is tricky.
Yeah.
But this is another piece of information to fit into the jigsaw, if you like.
Right.
And just in case the listener thinks that I've got some nasal problem, any issues during that interview were from my colleague Toast.
There's a contribution from an animal, isn't it?
Yeah, who's snoring in the corner and having a little dream.
Little doggy dreams.
Alison and I are in the Wiggly kitchen, so any creaking is my table, my kitchen table, my old pine, lovely kitchen table, which was a wedding present from Adrian and Valley. So thank you very much. Mind you, it was 16 years ago. Oh, heck.
Wow, it's done well.
Anyway, we're sat here, and in the middle of us, we've got the audio recording device. Hello, audio recording device.
It's quite cute,
Yeah. And we've also got this gorgeous herb, wild marjoram. Bit of a sniff about it.
Yeah, there isn't much at the moment. That's just because it's too cold.
Probably it's too cold.
Yeah.
But I know in the summer there's
Yeah.
a gorgeous smell. And so instead of being the cultivated marjoram, this one's...
The wild marjoram, oregano vulgare.
Where do you find it then, Al?
Well, you can find it in the wild. It grows
yeah, I can
readily
smell it now.
in the wild.
Yep.
Yeah, it comes out a bit. It's found mainly on chalk and limestone. It prefers neutral soil, really, and it has nice bright pink flowers on, July to September.
And often I put it on my pizzas.
Yeah, you can put it on your pizzas, or you can chop it up and put it in your spaghetti bolognese, or in fact, in the Food for Free book by Richard Mabey, because I didn't have a look at that,
book.
It's great. He's got a recipe for herb scones. Yeah, and you just chop that up, put a bit of that in, a teaspoonful per recipe.
Plain scone with herbs and then a bit of butter, is it?
Yeah, that's it. And he serves it with roast meat and vegetables.
Sounds delicious.
Yes.
And wild marjoram, how does it differ from the cultivated type that most people have got in their herb garden?
Well, it's not quite as strong scented, obviously, and you have to trim the flowers off if you want to use it for cooking, because otherwise it goes very bitter.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so before
just the leaves.
Yeah.
The leaves are beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah.
Little tiny
quite
leaves.
reddish colour.
Yeah, a little tiny bit of lilac-y colour in them, but they're really nice. Does it spread like conventional marjoram
It
does?
will spread quite a lot. You can control it in a herb pot or in a window box, that sort of thing. It'd be ideal, wouldn't it? Outside
Yeah.
the kitchen.
And
window.
butterflies, I think, love it.
Yeah, butterflies love that. It's a real nectar source as well, for bees in particular. Excellent for that.
And when would I plant it?
Spring onwards, really. It might be a bit frost sensitive.
And how have you cultivated it?
That's all grown from seed, like the other plants. It's grown in that pot from tiny mini plug that we put in the pot, and then it bushes out. So from one little plug in that pot, that's how it spread. And sort of last summer that would be potted up.
Really? Just so the listener knows that from one little tiny plug, so a plug that would have been about 2 centimetres wide, now we've got this gorgeous bushy plant that's about 6 inches wide. There you go. See, I go from centimetres to inches at the drop of a hat. So it's about 10 centimetres wide. It looks absolutely, completely healthy and bursting with life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And yet, you know, to be honest, it's been outside here all winter.
It has, and it is still thriving. But in the spring it'll pick up and new growth will come.
And what's it planted in?
It's planted in peat-free compost.
Oh, peat-free!
Yeah, peat-free, they all are, yes, with added fertiliser.
And so is that a coir base or...?
Yes, coir base.
That's great, isn't it? God.
Yeah, look at the roots on that, that's really done well, actually.
Is that pot bound, Al?
No, that's not pot bound at all, that's
lovely,
spot
isn't it?
on, that one.
Spot on, well done, girl.
It's a corker.
A corker. Now we're going to have to cut this short because now the time is 4 minutes past 5 and Alison is a fantastic timekeeper.
Yeah, I wonder what the overtime rate is.
For a chat on a podcast about tuppence. This is a purely non-profit making activity, I can assure you.
Oh. I better go back to racing.
You had. Thanks, Al.
Bye.
You've been on a little mission, haven't you? You've just come back from 4 days in where?
4 days in Almkirk in Holland, followed by Amsterdam.
And we're joined by 3 of my favourite chicks.
Oh, Richie.
Rachel, Sandra and Jodie.
Hello.
Just a minute, so now you've got 4 of your favourite chicks.
The 3 of my favourite chicks.
And me.
No. No, you're not supposed to prompt me.
You're the mother hen.
Yeah, you're the hen.
So anyway, back to where we started from. So why did you go over to Holland, Jode?
We went over to see our supplier, Biodone, who supply us with all our worms and our mealworms, and to see how it all works.
So people think it's strange, don't they? Because they think, why do Wigglies get their worms from Holland? Why do Wigglies get their worms from Holland?
Well, when we started, we bred all our own worms. Every single one of them. And that resulted in one massive pile of manure.
Right.
And several of us sat on top of it. Do you remember those days, girlies?
Yes, I do.
So we used to have to sort through the worms, we used to have to separate the worms using light, and we used to have to make sure that we fed the worms and make sure that the worms are all coming to the surface, and then something would go wrong.
Right.
And then customers, darn them, would want the worms.
Yeah.
So then we had to pick them, and it was cold, and it was awful, wasn't it?
And you had a job to find them. And
Yeah. So
nightmare.
we decided that there was lots of worm breeders in the UK. Maybe we could buy some of them.
Yeah.
But as time went on, what do you think of them, girls?
They ran out of worms, basically.
Yeah. People don't understand that, do they?
No.
If they order their worms, they don't quite understand why they're not going to turn up on the day that you've told them that they are going to turn up on.
That's right. And they also give you all their worms and don't keep enough back to make the babies to produce the next lot.
Right.
And so eventually they go dry, and then that was that. So
There's been lots of what I would call scams in the UK and the US, and in fact I think the Dutch worm industry, where a person comes up with the idea of supplying worms, say per metre. The farmer buys the worms per metre and then sells them back, but there's no end market. That market just goes to another farmer to buy back. So I think they did it with rabbits, I think they did it with ostriches, and worms was brilliant because, of course, you never really knew how many you got. So it was a kind of disastrous industry.
But obviously the Dutch have got it sus now. So these guys that produce the worms for Wigglies now are reliable, which in many respects is the most important thing. So you went over there, when you went over on a Thursday night, and what was the first thing you did when you landed?
have a beer.
Well, Rach took charge.
Did you, Rach?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rach.
Yeah, they're a little bit unorganised, so...
Yeah.
Well, we hired a car and we drove down to where the hotel was booked by Biodome. And the guy's name is Boss. Stopped there the night, and then the next morning we went to Biodome to meet up with Boss, and he showed us around his worm farm.
Right, Jean, tell me a bit about your worm production.
We have now a production from 5 million baby worms in 1 week.
Yeah.
And we can't breed all the worms in this building.
Right.
Dus we're bringing to 30 worm breeders a part of those worms, and she breed them up for us.
Okay.
We give them the soil and the food.
Yeah.
And we have an agreement with the breeders that we buy all that worms back, and then we send them to your company.
And what do the farmers think of this? Is that successful for them?
Yes, they are very happy about that, and she wants sure that she can sell the worms, and before she breeding, and sometimes she coming with the worms and not in the right time.
Right.
She coming in September with a lot of worms, and then sometimes nobody need the worms, and then she's staying there. Three kind of worms, sort of worms, yes.
Okay, so these are perfect for Wiggly Wigglers.
Yes, that's what we need. The reason is that we have the coming, so it's the nature.
Natural.
The normal,
so
normal
they're
way.
naturally good at composting.
Yes.
So we're in a room with hundreds of white stacking bins. Roughly, how many worms have you got in this area, Jean?
This area, a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of worms.
Some boxes are 10,500 one box.
So
and you stay, I think, 25 euro pallets with 40 boxes.
Right.
And then
it's millions, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's millions.
Yeah.
Okay, can we go and have a look at the baby worms?
Yes. Okay. Sprinkling now in this room a lot of water. Here is 22 degrees Celsius.
Right. So
the eggs we set in new eggs in this room Friday.
Right.
And it is now Saturday, and tomorrow she's sprinkling a lot of water in this.
Yeah.
That is you can steam.
Yeah.
And then the eggs stimulate the eggs to come in.
Hatch out.
Yes.
So the eggs like to hatch out when it's warm and wet.
Warm and wet, yes. And we do first we do water in the boxes by the ground.
Okay, so first you mix the water with the soil.
Yes, but in the eggs.
And how many eggs are in each box?
We try to do 5,000 in one box.
Did you count them all yourself, John?
Yes, we no, not all not all them, but we a little bit. We 1 liter.
Yeah.
We tell 1 liter how many eggs in 1 liter,
okay.
And then we set 250 eggs in 1 liter, and then we make the sum that we.
Yeah. So we watched you yesterday put these boxes together, I think.
Yeah.
And so now it's Saturday. When will the eggs hatch out?
When she coming out?
Yeah.
Yes. After 1.5 week.
Okay.
10 days.
10 days.
10 days. She coming out, and then we give them no food. Only ground, no food, and it's only for that she must all the eggs must coming out, and then we give them food.
So once they're all hatched and they're little white worms.
Yeah, but if we do that not, then you have very difficult sizes. If we food them directly,
right. Oh, I see.
First all the worms are out the eggs, and then we give them a little bit wet ground on the top.
A little bit of fresh ground?
Yeah, wet, fresh
red
ground.
Clay.
Yeah.
Okay, red clay soil.
Yes. And the worms coming on the little worms coming on the top.
Yeah.
And she eating a little bit, and then after 1 week we give them baby food.
Baby food.
And that is
and was that the we saw you fermenting?
Yes, that is what we make with the bacteria.
Bacteria.
Yeah.
So like we make the effective microorganisms to spray on the garden and to make bokashi out of. You use bacteria with molasses to feed baby worms.
Yes.
And
yes.
Is there a bit of skepticism about that? Do people believe that that's a good thing?
No, a lot of people don't believe it. And
look, it's his phone. We always get that on a Wiggly Podcast. I'll just interrupt John to talk to Boss, because Boss, of course, we found out is actually the president of Holland.
The president of the worms, or what do you mean?
Yeah, well, we found out that when we come to Holland that we found all these posters with Vote Bas de Pooter on them.
Yeah.
So, Boss, what's that all about?
That means the people here in the Netherlands can give a vote for a guy to give a vote for the government.
Yeah.
And a lot of people here in my surrounding give a vote to me.
Woo! There we are.
Wow.
But we did go up the road and see that some people had actually crossed your face out.
Yeah.
Not so popular with them.
No, by some people I'm not so popular, but by the most I'm popular.
And what's your role in Biodome, Boss?
I organize all the export and contacts with the customers. We're selling a lot of worms to America for fishing. And also worms to England, mostly for the canner worms and the mixed worms.
Yeah.
And you are good customers of us,
Wiggly
Wigglers. We are very appreciate very that we can do business since several years with your company.
Fantastic, thank you, Boss.
The only problem is a little bit the price.
We'll cross that out.
Fantastic. So they've got, obviously they've got a massive operation, haven't they? What was the thing that struck you, son, about the operation?
The first thing that was the most shocking was the smell.
Right.
There was this sort of, it was a fermented smell.
Really?
Appley.
Really?
And I thought, worms, you're not expecting an
No.
appley sort of smell
No,
when you walk
that's right,
through
no.
the door.
No.
Because our worms, when we've got lots and lots of worms, you walk into our cooler and it's, not the pleasantest of smells, is it?
No, that's right.
And we later found out that's because of the food they're using to feed the worms up.
Right.
They use a fermenting process similar to our EMs
Yeah.
to build up the worm's immune system.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All completely natural, but they ferment it in exactly the same way as you fermented your EMs, wasn't it, Joe?
Oh, yeah, in that yoghurt maker.
Yeah.
And when we went in there, like Sam said, you could smell that smell, and he showed us this vat next to where they're putting it in with the baby worms, and it looked exactly the same as what it did in the yoghurt maker that I made it in, with like white sort of scum on the top, and exactly the same smell. And we were quite shocked because we didn't know they were using this in the worms too.
No, that's right.
I'm really pleased that they were as well at the same time.
John is the expert in the worm farm department, and John said that lots of times when he tells the growers, so they grow them on at different places, that he's using microorganisms, they're like, you don't need all that, it's a bit mumbo jumbo, but actually he's confident that it makes the resilience of the worms better, and also it means that the bedding lasts longer and is more nutritious. So it's all tied in.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Isn't that incredible? Didn't they have an amazing way of sorting the worms from the material when they harvest them?
Yeah, they'd had a machine developed for them. Well, it was a huge machine. It went up a conveyor belt, which sorted the worms from a lot of the compost and bedding, and then they went along this extra bit, and it was a circular cylinder thing that spun round and round with holes in it like a sieve.
Yeah.
And the very fine bedding dropped through there, and it just separated out the worms from the chunky bits that were left and spat them out at the end in different directions. So it was done on the weight at the end.
It's amazing. So fully automated then?
All automated.
So I had visions of little Dutch Oompa Loompas sorting out
the
worms.
The machine was Charlie in the chocolate factory, but the humans weren't.
So you say. Yeah, fantastic.
We asked him if it damaged the worms, because it really looked like, really spinning out of control, but he said no, there's
a bit bruised, like.
Just a bit. It's like going on a fairground ride, isn't it?
Yeah.
But no, he said it was fine.
Wow.
From worms to Monty's Wormcast.
The Wiggly Wormcast podcast by Monty, a weekly fact on worms. Mealworms aren't earthworms at all. When they have pupated, they become beetles. The adult beetles have wings but rarely fly.
Thank you, Monty. Next week, we've got local wildlife expert Neville Hart coming on the show, and you'll find out why our own Ricardo doesn't necessarily agree with him. So, speak to you next week. Bye. So, Rich, I bet you often go Dutch, don't you?
Yeah. yeah. You've already said that once today.
No, that's not because that was pre-recorded.
Yeah. I see. So,
hang on. No, for God's sake.
You could have just left that in though anyway, because it doesn't matter whether it's pre-recorded or not, because it's part of the banter, isn't it? You don't necessarily have to correct me.
This is the end.
This is how it happens.
Yeah. Right.
Michael.
Okay.